This is the last session that we are co-chairing, me and Jan, Dusan Stojkovic and Jan George. Let's start this last session with my favorite topic, GDPR. I will just say there is no PR like GDPR. So this is Maria Stafyla from RIPE NCC. Please take over the mic.
Hello, everyone. Indeed, you're right. GDPR is it took a lot of discussion and it monopolized our mailboxes, newsletters, everything. And as the only lawyer in the room, I would like to thank you for being here and for being willing to hear to such a legal topic. For those that we haven't met, I'm Maria Stafyla. I'm one of the legal counsels of the RIPE NCC, and I'm here to present you how we how we have been implementing the GDPR on the RIPE NCC services, and about the work that we have done so far. So, first of all, a few words about the RIPE NCC, and I will explain later on why I'm saying this. It's not because you are not aware of all this already. We are a non-for-profit membership association established under Dutch law, and we are one of the 5 regional internet registries responsible for the registration of internet number resources in Europe, Middle East, and Central Asia. Our RIR role is very crucial for the operations of internet globally, and in order to perform this role, accountability and clear procedures are vital. Why I'm mentioning this information is because our RIR function was a fundamental aspect that we took into consideration when deciding about our approach with regards to GDPR and how we would implement it on the RIPE NCC services. So data protection is not something new for us. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, the RIPE NCC is established under Dutch law, and it was already covered by the EU Data Protection Directive. In 2006, the RIPE community identified the need to comply with this legislation, and it established the Data Protection Task Force with a mandate to look into how personal data is processed on the RIPE NCC services and the RIPE database, and to establish clear procedures and mechanisms in order to ensure effective protection of personal data that is processed on the RIPE NCC services. The outcome of the report that was done by the task force is documented in the data protection report that you can find online on our website, and here I have the link in case you want to go through it. So, GDPR, what is it? It's the regulation that describes how personal data may be processed and under what conditions. It describes what are the rights of the individuals, what are the responsibilities and obligations of the responsible parties. It became applicable on the 25th of May, in case you've missed it, but I'm sure you haven't. So, how did the RIPE NCC approach the GDPR? In March, and first of all, GDPR for us was conceived as an opportunity to review all of the data sets and processing of personal data that we do internally with regards to every service, process, and procedure the RIPE NCC has in place. In March 2017, we established an internal project that is led by a cross-functional project team. And the reason that the project team is cross-functional, it consists of 2 legal counsels and 2 information security officers, is because data protection and privacy is not a strictly legal matter. It involves security, it involves developers, software engineers, and in general, every bit of the organization that has to do with personal data. While doing our homework internally, we engaged with external legal counsels and industry partners regarding their view on the matter. And of course, communication and consultation with the RIPE community has been a priority for us since the first day. So what were the first steps that we did? Together with every department, we went through their processes and procedures and services and tools they are using for their daily operations in order to identify what data they require to be provided for their services. And we classified the various data sets according to their criticality and their sensitivity. Based on this mapping of processing activities, we created catalogs of data sets, services, and processes. And according to this final map of our processing operations, we prioritized our areas of focus in order to go on with the evaluation of our responsibility, of the responsibilities and obligations that arise from the law. So what have we done so far? We started our evaluation from the RIPE database. Back in 2006, when the data protection task force was established by the RIPE community, it looked into the status of the RIPE database, and it put in place certain mechanisms and procedures in order to verify, in order to ensure compliance with the EU Data Protection Directive. Based on the work that was done by the task force back then, we analyzed the current status of the RIPE database in line with the basic principles of processing of personal data and the GDPR, and while keeping in mind what is our role as a regional internet registry and what is the value of the RIPE database. When personal data is processed, the 6 principles of processing of personal data must be fulfilled. One of the principles is the purpose limitation. Personal data may be processed only for specific, explicit, and legitimate purposes. The purposes of the RIPE database were already developed and established by the RIPE community and the task force, and they are already defined in Article 3 of the RIPE database terms and conditions. One of the defined purposes is to facilitate coordination among network operators in case of network problem resolution, outage notification, etc. For this purpose, the contact details of the resource holders and the contact persons they appoint themselves for the administration of their networks, of their internet number sources, it is crucial to be publicly available because, as you know better than I do, it is very important for internet and for network operators to be able to quickly establish communication and relationship with another network operator, even if there is no direct relationship between each other. Another principle that applies to processing of personal data is the legal ground. There must be a legal ground for processing of personal data to take place. The RIPE database contains contact details of resource holders, of the parties that hold the resources, and it also contains contact details of the contact persons of the resource holders. When it comes to the contact details of the resource holders, the legal ground that justifies their contact details to be made publicly available is the legitimate interest of the internet community and the regional internet registry system. Whereas when it comes to the contact persons of the resource holders must obtain the individual's consent before inserting the contact data, the individual's contact information in the RIPE database. And this can be obtained via their relationship, depending on what the relationship is. We performed this exercise with regards to all principles of processing of personal data and the personal data that is contained in the RIPE database. And what is important to keep in mind is that there are shared responsibilities between the RIPE NCC and the resource holder with regards to the information they insert in the RIPE database. The RIPE NCC is the party that maintains the RIPE database, but it is the resource holders who insert the information in the RIPE database. And for this reason, it is crucial to keep in mind that all you have to make sure you have a valid legal ground, that you keep the data correct and up to date. And these responsibilities arise not only from the law, but also from the RIPE policies and the RIPE database terms and conditions. After having done the legal review, we identified several issues. Let me walk you through them. So the RIPE database returns current version of objects and also it provides also historical information. Although historical person and role objects are excluded, are filtered out from the results that are returned in historical queries, the nick handles of historical person and role objects are still returned. What does this mean? If a historical person and role object still exist in the RIPE database, a user may be able to identify who was the historical person or a contact person for a specific network, which in some cases might not be accurate because the nick handles were allowed to be reused until 2009. This is not in line with the purposes of the RIPE database, with the one that I mentioned before that justifies the contact details to be made publicly available, and it's also not in line with the data protection legislation. Another issue that we identified, and again is regarding historical information, is regarding the historical contact details of historical and current resource holders. If a resource holder is an individual, their contact information the RIPE database contains contact information of resource holders. When it comes to contact details of individuals, and more specifically, when we talk about historical contact information of individuals, it is not justified by the purpose of the RIPE database and the data protection legislation to return this information in the RIPE database. On a different topic, we are looking into the search criteria and the search functionality in the RIPE database. Currently, a user may perform a search in the web interface, for example, based on any search term, including the name of an individual, and the results will return every object that is related to either of the search criteria. The task force, back in 2006, from when they were doing their work from 2006 till 2010, has mandated to put in place a mechanism in order to restrict the unlimited access to the personal data that is in the RIPE database. And therefore, the acceptable use policy was put in place that is defining how personal data may be used in the RIPE NCC services. And also, it set a limit with regards to how many personal data may be returned per IP address, I believe, on a daily basis. What we are currently evaluating is if the current mechanisms that are in place in order to restrict the unlimited access is adequate enough in order to protect the personal data that is in the RIPE database. Regarding all these matters and the work that we have done so far with regards to RIPE database and the personal data contained therein, we did a presentation at the RIPE 76 at the RIPE database working group. And there was some discussion on the identified issues and some proposed solutions. We are currently working on implementing the changes. And before any change is put in place, we will write more labs articles and we will publish them in order to inform the RIPE community and everyone about their operational implementation and all the details around this. So please stay tuned in case you're interested. The RIPE NCC is not only maintaining the RIPE database, but as Axel has mentioned yesterday in his presentation, we do various sort of data collection, data visualization, and data access. So we have reviewed an example of this data collection is via the contact and various application forms that an individual will have to fill in when getting in contact with RIPE NCC for a particular matter. So, for example, for the SEE fellowship, If an individual is interested into applying, they will have to fill out a form and provide us with certain information. What we did with regards to these application forms is we went through the process, we evaluated what information is requested to be provided and for what reasons, and we established internal procedures on who has access to what information, and all this exercise resulted into updated privacy text where clear information is provided to the individual with regards to the data they provide to us. We also looked into how we process your data when you register in order to participate to any of the meetings that RIPE NCC is organizing, and not only for the registration purpose, but also in case an attendee requires assistance with their visa, the RIPE NCC is willing to provide an invitation letter, but for this purpose, additional information is requested to be provided, and also regarding the attendee list. Currently, we publish an attendee list in order to enhance the networking opportunities between the attendees of a meeting, and also in order to enhance the open and transparent policy development process. What we are currently reviewing and examining is for how long the attendee list may remain publicly available. On a different topic, we are evaluating the mailing list, and we are reviewing whether we provide sufficient information to the user when they subscribe to a mailing list, if the procedure for removing someone from removing oneself from a mailing list is as easy as the subscription process, and whether we provide adequate information with regards to the mailing list archives and the fact that they remain publicly available for certain reasons. And again, the reason for this is that it is the mailing list is one of the main core platforms where the policy development process takes place, and for this it is important that the archives remain publicly available in order to be able to go back to the decision-making process and so on. We also looked into the RIPE Atlas, RIPE Stat, what information we request from the various users to be provided, do we provide sufficient information, and I will try to speed it up. We also look into the RIPE NCC Access accounts, which is an account that allows the user to access one of the RIPE NCC services or interact with a service in order to create a more personalized dashboard. A very big element and part of our function is the RIPE registry, which consists of non-publicly available personal and non-personal data. When it comes to personal data, this may be kept for as long as it is required for the purpose that it was initially requested. We are carefully reviewing all the data sets that we have internally, while keeping in mind that historical information for the RIPE NCC and for the RIPE registry, it is very crucial in order to preserve the integrity of the registry, to be able to respond and to resolve potential disputes over registration of internet number resources, and to be able to demonstrate the chain of custody. We also looked into internal processes of personal data, who has access to what information, how do we store, do we have enough security. The outcome of this review was to sign data processing agreements with the external parties that is processing personal data on our behalf. For example, the RIPE NCC is using a performance management tool with regards to the performance management of their employees. And also we updated internal procedures when it was necessary in order to either bring it in line with a Gdpr or in order to make clear and to ensure that the rights and responsibilities of the responsible parties are clearly documented. So, as I mentioned before, we did one presentation at the RIPE 76 RIPE Database Working Group and a more generic one at the NCC Services Working Group at the RIPE NCC, at RIPE 76, I'm sorry. We published several labs articles on how we are implementing the GDPR, and of course there is more to follow. And we have a dedicated GDPR webpage on ripe.net where you can find all the labs articles we have published so far, and the ones we will publish in the future will also be there. So what is our message on GDPR? It is a legal obligation to continue monitoring and ensuring compliance with the legislation. And the RIPE NCC will continue doing that while keeping a balance between our role as a regional internet registry, the interests of the RIPE community, and of course the legal framework. So for us, compliance did not end on the 25th of May. Any questions?
No questions about GDPR? This is strange. Nobody here is running a NOG and has some questions how to implement GDPR? No? Okay, well, then.
I'm not running a NOG, but I do have a small question.
Please.
Maria, you mentioned that the Data Protection Act has been in force in the EU for quite a long time. So why is there so much panic over GDPR if this has already been getting done for a while and we've already been complying with this for a while?
This is a great question.
So the GDPR indeed is a very good question. And so let me explain. So the GDPR basically has the same basic principles of processing of personal data, so there has been no change with regards to these, but it introduced some fines. And I believe that many companies have been alerted just because of the possibility the authorities have to impose fines in case there is a violation of the law. However, the authorities, it's not that they will impose a fine the moment they see a violation, but they will take certain factors into consideration before they decide whether a fine has to be given to a certain company or not. I believe, apart from the PR thing that was mentioned at the beginning, I believe one reason that was so much fuss around it was as part of the effort of the authorities to inform the individuals about their rights, although most of the rights were already there by the previous directive.
Yeah, and there was much misinformation about that. Now we have to have explicit consent to store other people's data. There are other mechanisms that can prevail with this thing. Yeah, let's fix this for life.
Jan, if I may add to this comment, consent is one of the legal grounds. The GDPR has 6 legal grounds where you may base the processing of personal data. Yeah. Indeed, consent is not just the only one.
Yeah, well, I've been told that the explicit consent should be the last one to use if you cannot apply others.
Okay, Vladislav Vedikov from Macedonia. I think that the scary story about GDPR was actually, before that it's a regulative, that's not obligatory, and in different countries, in EU and wider, it was differently implemented, and suddenly they are in a very good framework where very big punishments are there, and that was part of the problem. But also for countries which, for example, our country is not EU member, but what happened, our local data protection directorate decided that the best course to get things running is that you translate GDPR into the local law until you get to the EU. That will help things get really straighten up a bit, because terrible things were happening in different countries in concern of privacy, and that is maybe the reason why suddenly people said, we will get fined, there is a risk, let's do at least something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely, yes.
Okay, I don't see... Dima, please.
Yeah, well, we are a small operator in Ukraine. Well, we're not operator, the main operator. We have 20 employees or something like that, maybe 22. I heard there is an exclusion that GDPR practices are only applicable to the large companies, with large being either quantity of employees, turnover in dollars or some others. Is it true or not? They say like if you're a small business, then the fines in GDPR don't apply. It doesn't mean that the law doesn't apply. So can you clear this?
So the
on
size of
small versus large company.
So the size of the company and the size of the company, as well as other factors, will of course be taken into consideration by the authorities when they are considering whether to impose a fine or not. But indeed, there are certain exceptions with regards to smaller companies with fewer than 250 employees. So, for example, under the GDPR, the obligation to maintain records of processing activities is introduced, which does not apply to companies with employees less than 250.
Okay. And
But it's not that it doesn't apply.
and the company, by the way, is not a European Union company. So why should non-European companies worry at all? They just can't be fined if they're, let's say, completely in, I don't know, Ukraine, right? Or let's say Emirates. I mean, any other state that is not part of the EU. They just can't be fined.
The territorial scope of the GDPR has changed and is different than the directive. And yes, it has been widened. It is broader.
But jurisdictionally, you cannot apply your jurisdiction outside the European Union member state.
So
Sorry,
Dima,
okay, I don't want to discuss this, but I heard your answer.
Dima,
Okay.
for example, Afrinic is in Mauritius, but because I subscribe to their mailing list, they are now subject to GDPR because I'm from European Union, because they are processing my data there, right? So it works like this. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.